Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to part 2, Moving Minds and Bodies, Activating Social Emotional Learning, Physical Literacy, and Inclusion in Practice. In our first session, we laid the foundation, defining social emotional learning, exploring its connection to physical literacy, and understanding how inclusion and universal design shape our movement spaces. Today's focus is entirely practical. We're going to translate theory into action by looking at lesson planning, facilitation strategies, inclusive activity design, and specific examples that you can implement right away. Whether you're a seasoned physical education teacher or just starting to embed social and emotional learning intentionally into your practice, this session is about what works in the gym, on the field, and with all students. Here's what we're going to do today. Our applied session has 4 main objectives. First, we'll look at how to intentionally plan physical education lessons that develop social emotional learning skills. Second, we'll explore inclusive activity design using universal design for learning principles, how to plan for the full range of learners and the abilities right from the start. Third, we'll discuss facilitation in the moment, how to read the emotional room, co-regulate with students, and support their social emotional growth in real time. And finally, we'll walk through 2 concrete, maybe even a few more example activities. Okay, but in particular, I'd like to point out the emotion compass and the team triangle challenge. These integrate social emotional learning, movement, and inclusion seamlessly. To design effective social emotional learning infused movement activities, we must start with the end in mind. What competency do you want to develop? Let's say it's empathy. You might select a paired mirroring activity where students have to observe and replicate each other's movement. If the goal is self-regulation, maybe you introduce a yoga flow with different breath counts and various options for rest. Once you choose the movement task, you build in the tools next. You provide clear instructions, adaptations, and most importantly, afford time for reflection. That final piece helps students connect what they did with how they felt and ultimately what they learned. Our first little pause here, I just like us to just pause and reflect on our own experiences. Intentionality is at the heart of applying social emotional learning in physical education. It's about moving beyond activities, being just physical, and considering the emotional and relational dimensions at the planning stage. Here, I'd like you to just take 2 to 3 minutes to think of a specific time you tried to embed social emotional learning. Maybe it was a focus on teamwork. Maybe it was a focus on communication or managing frustrations. But try to consider what strategies you used. Now, turn to maybe the person next to you and just share this. If you haven't done this explicitly before, reflect on how perhaps you could or what you would change or add to an upcoming session. Here are just a few quick matches between social and emotional learning competencies and the various types of activities that support them. Again, the social and emotional learning competencies are things that we talked about in the last session. But for self-awareness, we need to grow through slow, focused movement. Okay, we need to show mirrored activities, body scans, or asking students to reflect on how they feel both before and after movement. Self-management, well, that can be built into things like obstacle courses with intentional pauses. Stop here, okay, at one of the obstacle course stations. Take 3 breaths and notice your heart rate. Social awareness shows up in partner activities or things like cooperative walks, where the focus is on noticing and responding to others' needs. Relationship skills are strengthened through team challenges that require planning and communication. Here we see things like cooperation and teamwork flourish. Decision-making thrives in games where students choose how to participate or how to adapt their role. Here, we're providing an option for empowerment, and with greater empowerment comes greater investment in the movement form. This table can help you start designing social emotional learning as somewhat of an entry point to your movement activities. Here we zoom in on how social emotional learning and movement goals align. Often, educators ask how to connect specific competencies to actual physical education lessons. Well, this chart offers an additional jumping off point. Think of each social emotional learning domain as somewhat of a lens. If your focus is again on relationship skills, how might you tweak a game to require communication and shared goals? If it's things like self-management, what does that look like mid-activity? I encourage you to use this chart as inspiration, not necessarily as a checklist. In the next 2 to 3 minutes, talk to those around you. Which of these pairings have you perhaps already used? Okay. And additionally, which might you like to try? Please share with those individuals near you. Okay. Again, this provides added opportunities for reflection on not what have we already done, but what we can do in the future. When we look at universal design in action, inclusive design begins before the activity starts. It's about building multiple pathways into movement so that every student sees a role for themselves. For example, can students throw, roll, or tap a ball instead of one required method? Okay, offering this variation plays into, again, affording opportunities for individuals to make choices and take some risks, make decisions. Another example is, can students choose a role that fits their comfort? Okay, whether that be a scorer, timer, or coach. Now, it's a really important thing to mention here that we are not assigning roles to students, but students are choosing a role that they, again, feel is best for them. A final example is, can individuals or students work with a buddy or self-select into a pace group? Again, our job as instructors is to facilitate individuals' comfort and safety within the movement context. Okay? Placing them into a group where they may only fall further behind is not going to lead to a positive physical activity experience. By providing them with the opportunity to select their own group or select their own buddy to partner with, what we are doing is providing them with choice and affording them the opportunity to take control of their own movement activity. These options don't lower the bar. They essentially raise an individual's access, okay, within the movement context. We might also pre-plan for things like equipment and space modifications. Perhaps could a larger target help? Could the timing be extended? Could we use visuals instead of verbal instructions, or even pair visuals with verbal instructions? Designing with this variability in mind means that we don't wait to adapt after somebody struggles. We plan for that success from the start. We're proactive, okay, in the initiatives that lead to social emotional learning and comfortability within the movement context. So again, going back to the idea of universal design, the UDL framework we explored in session 1, we see that it includes 3 aspects: representation, action and expression, and engagement. For representation, instead of just explaining verbally, we might use peer demonstrations, short video clips, or a visual step chart for movement sequences. Oftentimes, the more information that we can provide to an individual, the clearer it becomes to the learner. If we can prevent the learner from guessing, then not only do we increase their chance of success, but their enjoyment of the activity overall. For action and expression, let's say we're working on throwing. Students can use beanbags. Students can use scarves or softballs. They can throw overhand, underhand. They might even roll. What we're trying to facilitate here is what works best for them. Here we have to realize that not all learners are successful the same way. There is no one size fits all to learning activity or skill. As such, we need to optimize the learning environment for each individual, again, affording them the opportunity to see what works for them, thus providing them with a sense of agency in their own learning, ultimately leading to them becoming an empowered learner. For engagement, we let students co-create names, okay? Vote on things like warm-ups, or even remix an existing game to fit into their cultural context. Such affordances allow the student to become, again, empowered, and such empowerment will provide them with the investment into the learning context, thus increasing a sense of willingness to continue their engagement in the movement tasks. When we use universal design for learning, we give students option, autonomy, and access. And those are social emotional skills in action. When we look at adaptive strategies, adaptations are not just about accommodating specific needs. They're about making activities flexible by design. Some examples of adaptive strategies with regards to equipment and rules include using foam or textured balls that are easier to grip and perhaps less intimidating. Using preferred colors to establish and maintain engagement. Use varied sizes of equipment to facilitate increased levels of success. Provide directional markers to increase understanding. An example here is pairing a visual cue with a verbal one to ensure that your communication is understood. Another one is to allow multiple attempts, different methods, again, kick, throw, push, or to remove things like a time pressure. We're looking at eliminating rules altogether, okay, and then gradually reintegrating them. This reduces restrictions and encourages movement rather than creates a space where a negative experience is had, leading to something like withdrawal. We might want to create tiers within the same activity. For example, 3 challenge zones where students use their own level, okay? Easy, moderate, and difficult. And finally, and probably most importantly, we're looking to normalize the idea of modifications. Here we might want to provide everyone, okay, with the ability to choose different equipment rather than just those who might benefit from it. Say things like, you can choose the tool that works best for you today. When everybody has options, no one feels singled out. That's inclusion and social emotional learning working together. It has to be noted that even the best planned lesson needs in-the-moment adjustment. Real-time facilitation means reading the emotional landscape. Is the energy getting a bit too high? Is there an extensive sense of excitability amongst the students? Or are students showing signs of stress or withdrawal? Is one student disengaging? If there is an answer of yes, okay, to things like those last couple of questions, here are some tools that one could use within the movement context to facilitate a level of social emotional learning. The first is co-regulation. Okay, you model calm breathing or offer a moment to reset. Okay, and we say this co-regulation because you are doing it alongside the student. The second one is responsive prompts. Instead of saying something like, stop doing that, okay, say something like, that looks like it didn't feel right. Okay, do you want to talk or try again? Okay, what this does is it provides an opportunity for individuals to verbalize, okay, what they are feeling, okay, and what they intend or their intention is to do next. The final one that I have for you today is reinforcing what matters. I noticed how you stayed focused even when your team fell behind. That's leadership. What you're doing is finding that silver lining into what happened. Okay, skills might have been off. Okay, somebody might not have won. Okay, but what we are trying to do is find something positive that individuals can latch onto, okay, and have excuse me, and adopt a sense of self with. Okay, these micro moments build trust. They support social emotional learning, and they teach students how to manage themselves with a sense of grace. So inclusion and social emotional learning aren't just about planning. They're about how we respond in the moment. These real-time decisions matter. I want to discuss this scenario, okay, in maybe a group of 2 or 3 people. What might the student here be experiencing? What sort of body language cues might we be able to read? What are our options as instructors? Do we pause the group? Do we approach quietly? Do we redirect? Do we validate the emotion? Discuss your approach using the facilitation strategies that we reviewed. Things like co-regulation, emotional naming, and reinforcement of effort. Then consider how different settings might impact our choices or your choices. Take a few minutes with the people next to you to discuss. Building emotional vocabulary in physical education is essential. Okay, it's developing this rich emotional vocabulary is a core social emotional learning goal, and it can happen right in the gymnasium. Start by naming emotions out loud. That game was intense, but I felt a little anxious at first. or things like, I saw some big smiles when the taggers changed roles. Okay. We want to use visuals, things like feeling wheels, emoji cards, or colored zones to help students identify their state. Then we want to embed this idea of reflection. After an activity, ask students to complete a sentence like, I felt proud when. Maybe it's when you were encouraged by a teammate, okay, or you encouraged a teammate. Or I got frustrated when, okay, perhaps I missed, but I kept going, okay. These tiny routines help students build the language they need to understand and manage their emotions. And they occur in an ongoing basis. It doesn't occur just once, but time and time again while engaged in the movement activities. First, sample activity. Well, this is one of my favorite warm-up games, the emotion compass. How it works is you set up a compass shape on the floor using cones or things like visual markers. Each point represents a different emotion. North might mean excited, south is calm, east is frustrated, and west is proud. So play music while students move around freely, and when the music stops, you call out an emotion. Students go in that direction, and once there, they can do a number of things. They can pose, okay, on how they might see the emotion being visually represented, so they pose that emotion. They share a memory of when they felt that particular emotion, or they simply just reflect. Take a breath and think about how that emotion feels in their body. It's a real playful way, okay, very low stakes way to build things like self-awareness and normalize emotion as a part of movement. And it creates a bridge between physical activity and emotional literacy. That's what we call embodied social emotional learning in action. The other sample activity is the Team Triangle Challenge. Okay? This is designed to promote things like relationship skills, communication, and emotional regulation. Here, students are grouped in 3 or 4s holding a closed loop, like a stretch band, skipping rope, or even a string in the shape of a triangle. In the center of that triangle, they balance a small object like a beanbag. Their task is to move the triangle together through a course without dropping the object. That means they must adjust their tension, move slowly with control, and communicate clearly, but often non-verbally. You can vary the task, things like speed walking, moving around obstacles, or even navigating to labeled emotions. It's a quiet, focused, and incredibly powerful game. And at the end of it, we debrief. Debrief by asking, how did your group stay calm under pressure? What did good communication look like for you? And how did you handle the frustration? These are social emotional learning gold moments built right into movement. Now, unfortunately, for both the Emotion Compass and the Team Triangle Challenge, I do not have videos to share with you. However, if there are questions on, again, how these things operate, I'm happy to answer them in the question period at the end, okay, of this session. Now, when we look at games and we look at varying levels of ability, okay, we have to be able to adapt. So let's kind of apply what we've covered up to this point. The sample activities, the emotional compass, and the triangle challenge are versatile, but they may need to be tailored. Choose one of these activities, and in pairs or small groups, consider what kind of space that you have and what modifications might be needed for things like mobility, perhaps neurodiversity, or just varying comfort levels. Also think about social emotional learning. Are you emphasizing cooperation? Are you naming emotions? Okay, are you focusing on self-regulation? And how would you reflect, okay, on the experience with students afterwards? Take a few minutes to discuss in small groups. We'll move on after. So I'm going to provide you with some information on how I would adapt these two sample activities so that everyone has access. For the emotion compass, let students point, gesture, or use an emoji card rather than verbalize. Oftentimes, individuals do not feel comfortable verbalizing in a larger group, but tools, okay, like gestures, like, okay, emoji cards, these can help depict the feelings that students are feeling. Okay, we could also offer a seated version. Students use a spinner or use body postures instead of walking. Okay, for those individuals that are not ambulatory, okay, this seated version might provide them with the access into that activity that they are looking for. For the triangle challenge, we might want to offer flexible roles. For example, one student could be the caller, giving instructions, another the observer, watching for shifts and giving feedback. Okay? We might use adapted tools like Velcro targets or large foam balls for things like stability. Okay? Most importantly, with these two activities, okay, we want to normalize these options. Say that there are lots of ways to do this challenge. Pick one that works for you today. Okay? And when adaptations are seen as creative choices, not exceptions, they empower all learners. The big thing that we can't forget with these activities is that we need to debrief. Debrief with students, debrief as a group. The debrief is where the magic happens. It's where movement becomes meaning. So after any social emotional learning aligned activity, it's important to take a few minutes to reflect. Use open-ended prompts like, what emotions came up for you during the activity? Or what strategies did you use when you felt frustrated? Or how did your team communicate or show support? You can also use various tools, okay? Things like sentence stems, okay? These are fill in the blank type questions. I felt blank when blank, okay? What these sentence stems do is that they provide a starting point for the students, okay? Especially if individuals have trouble articulating their emotions. We might provide things like a group sharing circle, okay? Where individuals share in a circle or stand in line if the time is short. But what we do is that it provides each and every individual the opportunity to share what they are feeling. Or there might be some other creative options, for example, and again, this depends on how much time you might have, but drawing how the activity made them feel, or writing one word on a sticky note and placing that up in the gym. The goal isn't deep therapy here. Okay? It's simple reflection, practicing the habit of connecting a physical experience with emotional learning. Now, choice here is at the heart of things like autonomy and agency, and it's a powerful, powerful social emotional learning strategy. One way to scaffold choice is with tiered options. For example, in a balance activity, ready might be walking a line with arms out, something that's very low entry. Stretch could involve walking backward, okay, something that might be of moderate difficulty. And challenge could add an object to carry. Okay, this is where we start to increase the complexity. When we provide a scaffolded set of choices, we foster autonomy because students choose where to begin and when to move between levels. You can also here offer opt-out language. If this feels too much for you right now, step to the side and you can rejoin when you're ready. Or you can invite this idea of reflection. What version of this game will help you feel successful today? Again, this is not only building emotional awareness, but it models this idea of respect and trust in the learner's ability to self-assess. Again, we want to articulate here that not all individuals will learn the same. Not all individuals will feel the same level of comfort in the movement environment. As such, it's important to offer these choices to provide individuals that level of comfort and safety in order for them to engage and participate to the optimized level. So just like movement, reflection can look different for different students. Okay? Here we need to offer multiple ways to reflect. Okay? Again, speaking loudly in a circle. Okay? This differs from writing a sentence on a card or drawing a feeling or a movement, or using those sentence stems to scaffold their thinking. Okay? What we need to do is, again, not only provide options, okay, for the movement tasks themselves, but options, okay, for reflection. Whatever kind of feels comfortable for the student or the individual we're working with. Some useful sentence starters include things like, I appreciate when, or I felt challenged by, next time I want to try. These are things that we can use to help individuals articulate their thoughts and thus their emotions. Make these options visible. Put them on a poster, put them in a slideshow, or provide students with various handouts. When students see that reflection isn't a one-size-fits-all model, they're more likely to engage authentically. This is real inclusion that we need to focus on for everybody, okay, to feel that sense of belonging. I just want to shift gears and just quickly talk about physical literacy one more time. And many programs mistakenly view physical literacy as this ladder with rungs, okay, and one right path. But lived experience tells us otherwise. A child, okay, may show confidence in dance but hesitate in sport. A student with limited mobility may flourish in rhythm but feel left behind in competition. So we need to start seeing physical literacy as somewhat of a spiral, okay, where we revisit concepts, adapt them, and integrate them over time. Just in terms of consideration, how can your programs reflect that? Okay, do your assessments or expectations allow for things like reentry, adaptation, or individualized programming? Just like the bottom point says, social and emotional learning and inclusion thrive when we kind of normalize that idea of nonlinear growth. So as opposed to it having a step by step, okay, levels of progression, we have to realize that physical literacy, very similarly to social emotional learning, okay, requires various paths. Okay, progression, regression, stagnation, fast, slow, all of these things are important to consider when we're looking at the social and emotional learning of all students. When we look at this idea of the intersections between social emotional learning, physical literacy, and inclusion, here's a simple design tool that you can use to sort of intentionally embed that idea of social emotional learning into your physical education activities. Again, we want to start with the end in mind. So start by identifying your social emotional learning goal. Here we're going to talk about empathy. Then what we're going to do is we're going to choose a movement task that naturally supports that skill, okay, like a partner balance walk. Next, we're going to decide on how we're going to prompt reflection. Okay, are we going to ask a question? Are we going to use a sentence stem? Are we going to offer opportunity for individuals to write a journal response? And then finally, what we're going to do is build in an access plan using universal design for learning. We're going to use visual cues. We're going to use peer supports. We're going to use adaptive roles. We'll use this template in a few moments for a group challenge, okay, but feel free to use it anytime you're designing lessons. Okay, basically, this is an enhanced version of what we spoke about before. But the big thing here is that we want to focus with that thinking with the end in mind, and then moving to the movement task and offering periods of reflection, okay, once we have that goal outlined. So here I've provided a little mini case study, but let's workshop this together. Imagine you're about to lead a warm-up, okay? It's something like freeze dance, okay? A relay, or Simon Says. You've got a beautiful, messy, diverse group. How do you adapt the rules, the roles, the space, and reflection moments? Think about who might feel excluded by the default version of this game, and how to make it welcoming without sort of diluting the experience. Before I give you my sort of case study solution, take a few minutes to discuss this with someone near you. This slide presents, again, that practical redesign. This is kind of my thoughts on how we can kind of practically redesign to emphasize things like social emotional learning, universal design for learning, okay, and inclusion. Okay, so this is a practical redesign of a basic freeze dance activity, reframed as emotion freeze dance. Okay, again, please keep in mind these are my thoughts on how I've kind of come to a solution with this case study. The goal here is to create an experience that supports social emotional growth while being fully inclusive of the students with various diverse needs. This activity allows for student choice in how individuals move. Okay, they can move standing, they can move seated, or they can move with props. Okay, and it offers roles that all students can take on. Perhaps a student would like to be a DJ or an emotion caller. Okay, when students freeze, they express an emotion with their body. This links that idea of emotional awareness with movement. Moreover, this activity highlights how partner mirroring promotes things like social connection, and how the reflection component helps sort of solidify learning. Okay, remind the group, okay, that inclusive, emotionally intelligent physical education, okay, can be dynamic, okay, and it can be expressive, and it still can be fun. And it's important to remind those who are taking part, okay, that nobody may have the same way of moving, okay, the same way of expressing themselves. Okay, so I know we talked about those community agreements back in the previous session, but here is where we want to afford every individual that opportunity for free expression, and we need to offer this opportunity for respect amongst all individuals within that context. Let's try another one. Okay, think of an activity that you already use, maybe a tag game, okay, a warm-up or a relay, and using the template, okay, that we provided on a couple of slides ago, sketch out how you could redesign it to emphasize, okay, whether it's a specific social emotional learning goal, a moment of reflection, and at least one inclusion strategy or universal design support. without giving you guys additional time, I just thought I would put this up on the slide just for the sake of time. But here's one example of a redesign of this redesigned activity that I've done. So the original is a classic tag or one chaser game where we have one chaser and everybody else runs. But when we redesign it, okay, we assign roles. There are taggers, there are safe zone keepers, there are encouragers. There's a lot of various different roles to be played as opposed to just one chaser and multiple runners. After tagging, the tagger must say something supportive, things like nice dodge or thanks for playing. Okay, so we're making those emotional connections, building those relationships while engaged. Afterwards, students reflect on how it felt to be cheered or supported. Okay, when individuals are offering encouragement, okay, or giving high fives, okay, it's important that students recognize how this makes them feel. So we include universal design features, things like safe zones for rest, a walking option, and even a seated tag version with things like, I'm not sure if they exist, but pool noodles. Okay. The learning shifts just from running and chasing to things like empathy, awareness, and collaboration, all through simple tweaks. Okay. We are not blowing, okay, this activity out of the water. And we are not diluting the experience of individuals participating in it. We're just changing it, okay, to increase, okay, that emotion, that physical and emotional connection that social emotional learning focuses on. So just as we ask students to reflect, we must do the same. As educators, okay, we want to ask ourselves after each lesson that we provide, what went well, who might have been excluded, and how did I respond to students' emotions today? Okay. We have to be open to feedback as well. Okay. Ask students how they felt about the game and invite suggestions for how that game could potentially be improved. And don't forget to practice your own social emotional learning. You are a part of this community. Okay. The modeling, the tone, and the vulnerability that we experience, these are powerful teaching tools. And the more we grow in our own self-awareness and regulation, the stronger our teaching becomes. So to wrap up this portion of the session, here are just a few takeaways. Social emotional learning isn't something we tack on. It's something that we live. It's relational, it's embodied, and ultimately it's inclusive. As such, physical education is not just a class for movement, it's a class for growth. It's where students learn to regulate, collaborate, and express. Thoughtful design and compassionate facilitation then make all the difference. And the one thing that is ultimately, I think, forgotten is that we don't want to underestimate the power of small shifts. Adding one reflection, a question, one choice, or one encouragement loop can transform the entire learning experience. Okay, Rome wasn't built in a day, and often, we need to make small choices or implement small shifts, okay, just to get that sort of buy-in on behalf of students. Okay, so thank you for doing this work. Let's keep going. Okay, this is not something that exists in a one-shot deal. This is something that requires a sense of ongoing commitment, okay, on behalf, especially on behalf of the educator. So as we conclude, I just want to leave you with a few trusted resources, okay, for perhaps deepening your own practice and planning. The CASEL website, Okay, it offers things like toolkits, framework visuals, and school-wide social and emotional learning guides. Okay, it goes into a deeper sort of sense of what social emotional learning is all about. Okay, one that we don't have, sorry, that I don't have the ability to do in 1 or 2 hours. CAST, the organization behind Universal Design for Learning, provides interactive guidelines and practical design tools. And finally, the International Physical Literacy Association, which I am proud to be a part of, leads global work around physical literacy across age groups, contexts, and ability levels. Okay, the websites are there. It just takes a small or a click, okay, on these websites, and the information that is offered on these websites is substantial. I wouldn't offer them up to you if I didn't feel that they were worth taking a look at. If you're looking to dig deeper into theory and things like application, I also recommend a few books. Now, these aren't necessarily textbooks. Okay, I find that oftentimes we get more from books that might be related to things like the practitioner as opposed to academics. And these ones, The Body Keeps the Score. He explores that brain-body connection in trauma and regulation. Embodying Social Emotional Learning by Jennifer Miller is focused on integrating social emotional learning in real world school practice. Okay? And Move Your Body, Heal Your Mind brings together things like neuroscience and physical activity in a way that's highly relatable for educators. So explore these when you're ready, and bring them into your own network or community. They really make a difference, and they're really good reads. So, final reflection. Okay, let's pause to reflect one last time. Think back on everything that we've covered, the activities, the concepts, the design tools. Now I want to ask, what is one small shift, just one, that you can commit to making in your practice starting next week? Okay, it might be something as simple as adding a reflection question at the end of a warm-up. Okay, it might be offering some choice in how students participate in a game. Okay, or saying one more student's name each day as they arrive. Okay, write it down. Okay, journal it. Okay, make sure that you have it available to you. Okay, if you want to sketch it, if that's your style, okay, or if you prefer, share it aloud with somebody beside you. Change doesn't begin with big programs. It starts with the tiny choices that we do consistently. Okay, when we write them down, when we say them out loud, when we sketch it, when we journal it, whatever it might be, this is when we make it real and we almost make a commitment, okay, to following through. So just take a couple of minutes just to kind of consider what things that you could do, or what is one small tiny shift that you could do, okay, starting in your practice next week. So my final slide, I want to leave you with this one quote from W.E.B. Du Bois. Children learn more from what you are than what you teach. Every day, in every interaction, we model how to move through the world. We model calm, we model resilience, empathy, and even self-awareness. We also model things like curiosity, imperfection, and growth. The impact that we have doesn't live only in our lesson plans. It lives in the space that we hold, the relationships that we build, and the values we live out in every movement moment. Thank you again for the work that you do. I see it, I respect it, and I believe in its power to change lives. One game, one breath, one connection at a time. Before we officially close, I again want to thank you deeply for things like your energy, your reflections, and your commitment to inclusive and emotional rich education through movement. We've covered a lot of ground, 2 full sessions exploring things like theory, practice, and application of social emotional learning, physical literacy, and inclusion. now I'd like to open the floor if you have questions, reflections, or ideas you'd like to share. Again, this space is for curiosity and connection. Your voice matters here. Okay. And if you don't have the energy to ask anything now, I've left my contact information up on the slide in front of you so that you can contact me at a later date. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I wish you all the best. Take care. Bye.